So, you want to go ahead and move into your main topic?
Yep. All right. So, speaking of Princeton that I just got, I have a new amp now to use versus my Tweed Deluxe I've been using. Man, volume, like being able to use a volume knob is so nice.
It's nice.
I
isn't
gotta
it?
say, that
Yeah.
Tweed Deluxe, I mean, it's either on or off.
Yep.
But this Princeton's super nice. But the thing is, with a new amp, there's new problems.
Yeah.
So my new problem is that what I did with my Tweed, I cannot translate to my Princeton.
Correct.
So it kind of goes with saying, you know how we had talked about, like, I want a small board and I want a big board, and my small board's going to handle these amps, and my big board's going to handle these amps.
Let's be clear. I never talked about that. He talked about that.
Yeah. The problem is that's not realistic.
No. It's not.
So, new amp, new problems, because now I got to change up my board.
Yeah, your board completely changes.
When you went from a Tweed Deluxe to a Princeton, the EQ shape is different and the pedals just don't quite match.
If it was, if you were going from similar style amps, it would be a completely different story.
Right.
But you're jumping from Princetons to Voxes to Tweeds to all kinds of stuff.
I know. I was like hopeful. I was like, you know what, this EQ shape, it'll be good. But then I totally forgot I'm going to a Princeton to Tweed Deluxe, and that EQ shape is very different.
No.
So I'm gonna have to change up my drives. Luckily, I've got the tuner, the delay, my HX1. That's all staying, but my drives are gonna have to be switched up.
I think the drive section is the hardest part. However, I would say that occasionally the delay section has to change with a new amp too. It depends how you're running the amp.
I think it depends on if you're you, because you like 20 different delays.
No, you're right. You're right. I do love a lot of delays. But the reason why I'm saying that is because if you're taking an amp that we're not pushing, was more of a clean platform amp that takes a certain type of delay, that's great. And if you're taking an amp that is pushed, or you're driving into overdrive, you're going to need a different delay, or maybe you even need to run into an effects loop that requires possibly a different delay also. Your delays could change, but your drives, you're right. The drives are the biggest part.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of goes, it's unspoken, but your volume on your delays are going to have to drastically change too.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you go into a pushed amp and then you go into a completely clean with a lot of headroom amp, you're just going to have to change the volume of your delays. But luckily the Halo, you got presets, so I'm good there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've just noticed, like, I'm not as happy with my board, so I'm gonna have to change it up. When I go with the Tweed, I'll have to have different pedals for my Princeton, and I'll have to do the same thing with the Vox. And I was really hoping at least the Tweed and the Vox would be similar enough where I could keep them, and I think that probably is true. But so there comes a point where, like, you can try to generalize as much as you can, but then you're not going to totally be happy. And I'm not going to be as inspired. So, like, I've kind of just accepted the fact that if I go, like, midway, it works for this and it works for this, but I'm not super happy with both, I'd rather just switch it up and be completely happy with one amp and these set of pedals, and this amp and these set of pedals.
Oh, say change it up, right? Change it up!
I think with your big board, you've been kind of finding a middle ground like you're talking about. But I think with your big board too, you've also tried to cover lots of ground.
I have, and also I've got more space for drives. So if this doesn't work with this, well, then this other pedal works.
Yeah, you just want your board big enough where you can have a drive pedal for every amp you might run into.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I asked for.
Yeah, and I'm not a fan of that personally, that type of, like, trying to find that middle ground like you're talking about. And that's why I've just conceded the fact of every time I plug into a different amp, one of my different amps, I'm going to be changing my drive section.
Scream it! Change it up!
There's a few things that will stay no matter what. I think it's easy to keep boost pedals. I think a lot of boost pedals will stay the same. If you're a guy like, that's got a specific drive that he uses all the time, maybe going into a different amp, a new amp especially, you should try some different stuff.
Yeah, that's a good segue. We were talking about hotcakes a while back. And with this cleanish style amp, I'm like, man, I wonder how a hotcake would sound in this Princeton. I know a lot of people use them in Voxes, but I'm just curious. I've not really messed with blues drivers.
So many good pedals out there, It is hard to try them all, and then you get an amp, and you like go down the rabbit hole of what's the best pedal for this amp or whatever.
That's the thing.
And then you get deep in the rabbit hole of, okay, I like this style pedal. Which version of it do I want to get? And before you know it, you forget like, oh yeah, I haven't tried this pedal out, or I haven't tried this pedal out. I should check that out too.
And we've talked heavily on pedals on getting a new amp, but man, my guitars, they've changed like what I enjoy in the amp too. So because with my Tweed, I really loved my Strat. I really loved my SG. The Tele was fine, you know. I really like the Tele, but now when it comes to the Princeton, to me, the Strat is the sound.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know. It's just funny how like you change an amp, and it entirely changes like what you think you need.
Well, and then we're talking about combos here. If you change heads and you get a new head, you also have to think about what speaker combination, speaker cabinet do I want to run into.
That's a whole nother bag of worms.
It is, but new amp, new problems. I got
Yeah.
a new amp, but now my new problem is I got to find a cabinet that I like with it.
So what I'm trying to say is when you get a new amp, just budget for more pedals, maybe a new guitar. You know, it's got to be.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. What I would say is if you get a new amp, I would pull out some of your old pedals you've got that maybe you were a fan of at one time or they didn't work with your amp or whatever. Because we all got an extra drive pedal or two in the back, right? So go grab those, throw them on a little pedal board where you can just try out a bunch of drives. Whenever I got a new amp here a while back, what I done was I actually pulled my board completely apart and I stuck like 8 drive pedals on there. That's the only thing that was on my board was like 8 drive pedals.
Which do I like the most?
And I was just, and I would, which one do I like the most? And then I would be like, well, I don't like that one. So I pulled it off my board and I would narrow it down. And then I would start playing like, which ones stack? Because I do like to stack pedals. Not everybody likes that. But then I was like, which ones stack well?
Yeah.
It's like, well, those don't stack that well, but I like them separately. What if I flip their spots and try to stack them?
I think a lot of people, you know, when they buy a new amp, if you are one of those people that gets an overdrive pedal and then sells it, you're going to live in a lot of regret. Because you're probably going to be like, oh, I could have used that one pedal that I just sold. So I try to hold on to it a little bit. But if it's completely trashed, then, you know.
It's also a matter of if you're changing styles of amps. If you're changing styles of amps, absolutely. If you're staying in the same realm of amps because you found like, oh, I really like Blackface amps. I really like Marshall amps. I really like whatever style.
It has to do with the EQ structure.
It's a little easier to dump some pedals that you're like, obviously, I don't like that pedal.
Right.